Hi, welcome to this look into Give Me God of War difficulty. Give Me God of War is, of course, the slightly notorious highest difficulty setting for God of War 2018. This is going to be a combat-focused look at the early game. Hopefully there'll be something here you didn't already know about that you can use in your own play if you're trying Give Me God of War for the first time, or playing on any difficulty setting, really. Like a lot of people, I first played this game in 2018 when it first came out. Much later, I picked it back up, sort of in anticipation of the sequel, Ragnarok, coming out. I'm recording this audio, by the way, about 2 months before Ragnarok drops, so yeah, just in time for no one to care about this game anymore. Great timing. More of that timing on display later with some of my poor dodging. Anyway, yeah, I got back into it and eventually checked out Give Me God of War difficulty. And I found it quite a struggle. It was super rough. I died like a million times, but I think I learned a lot along the way. I'm by no means an expert player, but I certainly know more about it than when I first went into Give Me God of War. This is, as I said, going to be combat focused, so we're going to skip cutscenes wherever possible, and we're going to fast forward through most of the non-combat exploration. And we're focusing only on the early game. The early game can be rough, not just on Give Me God of War, but any difficulty setting. If it's your first time through, there's a lot going on that you have to learn about, and Kratos is so weak. It can be rough, especially if you're coming from other God of Wars, adjusting to enemies constantly being behind you, whereas the old games had a fixed camera, so it can be a lot. And this goes doubly so for Give Me God of War, adjusting to enemies diminish hit reactions, and you can no longer do certain moves like pin people to walls just by throwing your heavy axe while they're standing on the ground. There's a lot to adjust to. The early game can be pretty nasty. There are interesting ideas floating around out there about what you need to do to get through Give Me God of War early game. People say oh, you need to stay 100 feet away from all enemies and just throw your axe at them over and over. Don't engage in any up close melee combat or you'll just get wrecked. Don't do any side quests. Stay on the main path. If you do any side quests, you'll just get ruined. Don't do them until you're at least level 5 or level 7. So yeah, we're just gonna look at this part of the early game, which is arguably the hardest part of Give Me God of War difficulty. There are parts of Niflheim and Muspelheim challenges and some of the Valkyrie stuff can be pretty tough as well. The challenge remains throughout the game, but I found the early game, by the time you sort of get through it, you've learned a lot that you kind of carry through to a lot of the rest of the game. So we're starting here in the Wildwoods, and we'll make our way down to the Lake of Nine and explore around it a bit, and then I think we'll end the series somewhere around Alfheim. At that point, Kratos should be pretty geared up and in good shape for what comes next. This isn't a for real walkthrough. I'm not gonna have step-by-step instructions for each fight. It's pretty informal commentary. Sometimes I might not have much to say about certain fights, and I'm not claiming I'm doing things in the best way. I'm definitely not. There's other approaches and definitely things I don't know about, but hopefully you find something helpful here. And if you're someone that was curious about Give Me God of War mode, but was sort of intimidated by it, hopefully this will help you get over that. There's no need to be intimidated. If you're someone that tried it and just got your ass handed to you, you'll hopefully understand that is totally normal. I may not be dying a ton in this series, but I definitely did my first time through. This is not representative of your first time through on Give Me God of War difficulty. And I think you'll see through this playthrough that the game is totally conquerable, even if you're not like a prodigiously gifted gamer with godlike reflexes. So yeah, if you were interested at all in Gimme God of War difficulty, but sort of put off by its reputation, hopefully this will encourage you to check it out. I've had a lot of fun with it, and it's really made me enjoy the game a lot more as a whole. That said, not everyone needs to play this game on the highest difficulty setting. You know, caring for loved ones, feeding the hungry, curing diseases. These things are all, I wouldn't say better than playing God of War on the highest difficulty setting, but let's just say like they're equally good uses of your time. So yeah, it's not for everyone. I recently posted a sort of a general tips and tricks video for God of War, and I'll put a link to that video in the description here. That can be thought of as sort of a companion piece to this series, and I'll sometimes reference moves or concepts from that video. Alright, that's the introduction done with. Let's get into some actual fighting. So here's the very first fight of the game. Kratos is extremely limited here. He can't sprint or quick turn, but he can still pin dudes to trees, and that's really handy, especially early on when Kratos is so sort of squishy and limited. You don't want to get too carried away on it though. Here you can see me. I'm like so determined to pin this guy to a tree that I end up getting hit. And this is sort of a general theme. This is how the game gets you often, is you get sort of tunnel vision. You get too determined to do a certain attack or to hit a certain enemy that you lose focus of the big picture and don't notice the draugr stabbing you in the side. But it worked out anyway. By the time I got him up in the air, he was basically dissolved. And you see here a little air juggling from weapon switching. Even though you're so limited in the very beginning, you can actually juggle people a little bit. So there's a little more competently performed pin. We're going to see here in a little bit, one of these enemies is going to turn elite. What that means is, well, you'll see he'll get this blue glow around him. Enemies in Gimme God of War mode that have taken damage, if left alone for too long, they turn elite. Here it is. And they get these glowing blue eyes afterwards, and they go up a level and they become more aggressive, and some of them get unique new attacks as well. So that's something you have to kind of watch out for. So there, we made it through the first fight, and on to the wolves. These early game wolves are like probably the most dangerous enemy in some ways in the early game. They just don't really telegraph their attacks very well, and the game also just sort of decides to make them elite, like arbitrarily, which can be really rough with wolves because their leaping attack, sometimes, if they outlevel you and you have to parry it, the timing's tricky, and the other wolves will just destroy you while you're stun locked. But one of the safer ways to deal with them is to freeze one and wail on it a bit, freeze one and wail on it a bit. Here I'm having some luck with melee. One of the keys in this game is trying to line up enemies so that they're all in front of Kratos, especially certain, and then enemies will bonk into each other and cause each other to stagger. You want to always be mindful of being flanked or being hit from behind, getting too much tunnel vision. Try to position yourself, like position yourself and being aware of where people are in the battlefield is just a huge part of the game. So here's our second major draugr encounter. We're, I think, going to do a bunch more wall pins. These insta-kill attacks, like I said, are super helpful early on in the game when your options are limited. You know, everyone loves, you know, sexy multi-hit juggles, but in GMGOW difficulty, enemies are so aggressive they will punish you if you ignore them. They will flank you and interrupt your attacks. Even these like chump level 1 draugr are no joke on this difficulty. So you're sometimes better off just getting rid of them as soon as possible. And when you're down to one guy, like here, you can try to get fancy and do some juggling. That guy was like already down to half health. I think he was meant to become an elite really quick, like that cheating wolf from earlier, but we managed to catch him and prevent that from happening. Here we're off to our first optional area. Doesn't really count as a side quest, but you know, more very dangerous wolves back here. And you can see I'm trying to, when I engage a melee like this, I'm trying to line them up in the camera, trying to not let them be one behind me and one in front. There's a nice some collateral. That 4-hit R1 combo that finishes with that big baseball swing does, you know, a bunch of knockback on anyone it hits, and it's great for getting that collateral damage, for bonking enemies into each other. There's that nasty leap attack. So far we've managed to keep this draugr from going to lead, so that's fortunate. That was not always something I paid attention to when I first started playing GMGOW mode. I just sort of shrug and be like, well, I guess elite enemies are part of it, but I've found when I was recording for these videos in particular, I found myself paying a little more attention to that, and it is helpful. If you can interrupt that, you know, it's good. Not just interrupting their transformation, but like being mindful of who you've injured and maybe trying to restrict damage to, as you know, one enemy at a time as much as you can. Obviously, you can't always do that, but the more you can, not just hurt. You know, if you're facing like 6 draugr, kind of a bad idea to hurt them all with like some big runic attack. If all that's going to happen is all 6 of them turn elite, and then you've just got a longer, harder fight ahead of you. Here's our first troll fight. We're gonna do some probably some dodge offset to get our 4-hit combo in, like there. More about dodge offsetting in the tips video I mentioned, which I'll put a link to, as I said. It's funny, this fight is sort of framed as a tutorial for Atreus. It's like, here's how you use Atreus, here's... but you kind of don't really need to use him much for this fight. I mean, I'm sure there's other tactics that I'm ignoring here, but as far as I can tell, you just kind of want to get in there and start whacking the guy and dodge his attacks. You'll notice also that the heavy R2 attack does really good damage on this guy. Like, it's pretty comparable to the combo finisher, the 4-hit R1 combo finisher, to the point where, you know, you could probably get away with just heavy. Oof, getting away with it here. I'm pretty hurt. You know, it's not unusual for me to die in this fight, or in the wolf fights, or even the draugr fights. I mean, for one thing, people are dangerous, but for two, I find as you get comfortable with this mode and play through it once and then try again, and you get too cocky and you start horsing around and trying to do silly stuff. So dying is always a part of this mode. Sometimes you deserve those deaths. Well, you always kind of deserve them, but sometimes you're learning and figuring out how to get through, and sometimes you're just screwing around. Here we're taking advantage of rabbit punches to the back of the head, which is sort of what this little area is designed to tutorialize, and we're taking them at their word. That is, along with pinning people to walls and ring outs, knocking people off ledges. These are all really efficient ways of insta-killing enemies, and super helpful in these early parts of the game with your very, very weak Kratos. Here, notice the camera movement. Often I'm swinging on one guy but trying to drive them towards the other guys. As I said, like that baseball swing, it tends to knock enemies in the direction the camera is facing. So Kratos he's a snowplow. I've heard it said. Maybe the dev said something like that, but he's really great at doing damage directly in front of him, but his sides and back are pretty vulnerable. And success in GMGOW mode largely hinges on you sort of figuring out how to control the camera and, as I said, be mindful of enemies and not leave yourself open to attacks from the side. We're on to the Baldur fight. Not going to have probably a ton to say about this fight. It's funny, when you first play the game, you're like, oh, I wish there were more boss fights. The boss fights are amazing. But I found that the more I played and the higher difficulty, you start to think like the real game is fighting all the regular enemies. That's where it's interesting, and the different setups, the different like groupings of enemies that you face. These boss fights are just sort of little rote feeling and predictable. They don't vary as much. Once you learn them, they're not as dynamic as fights against a bunch of smaller enemies. Those seem to have more sort of unpredictable stuff and require more improvisation. A few things to note. There are moments in this where like right there where it zooms in and you're blocking his attack, that seems like it's like a cutscene or something, but if you attack during that, Kratos will attack he'll hit Baldur away from. So like I didn't understand that immediately. Like, you're still retaining some control in this fight, even parts that look like they're, the first time I played this, I was like, oh, it's a cutscene, and Baldur is just deciding arbitrarily to hit me. Like, that seems okay, I guess that's fine. It's not always obvious in this highly cinematic game when you do or don't have control. So we are going to fast forward through the rest of this Baldur fight. If you want to try to follow along with the action, just pay attention to me and Baldur's health bars. It's actually a pretty close fight, but that said, I don't think you're going to miss out on much by me fast forwarding. And if you want to just skip to the next batch of commentary, I'll put time code up on the screen now to let you know where to skip to. So now we have a bit of a hike before the next fight. You know, I thought about just cutting out everything except combat, just having clips of combat, but I thought that it might be of use to people to sort of see the fights in context of the rest of the game. So I just left in this sort of fast motion of the rest of the game. I think this will also be helpful for people to see like optional areas I'm picking and what order I'm going to. Not that it's like the optimal order, but it it could be helpful if you are having a hard time with it and wondering what viable options are. This is one viable option. Here's our first unlock, our first skill unlock. We're doing Executioner's Cleave, which is a very powerful move. There's info about it in the linked video. I talk about that tips video. Basically, though, it's just it has tons of iframes, so it's good to do in high traffic. Does good damage, and interestingly, it knocks smaller enemies, knocks them prone, including ones that are over leveled that are hard to otherwise knock down. You see my predilection for tripping enemies here. Failed to trip that guy. He was a little too high level, I guess, or maybe I missed his feet. But tripping is something I didn't do much. The first time I played this game, I was like, "Oh, that's cool," but like, I didn't know how to get to them in time to take advantage of it, or how to use Atreus to sort of keep people prone, or how to like bounce them off the ground with Frost Rush, which is a level 2 axe skill, also in my tips video. But I'd be like, okay, well, tripping like seems to mildly inconvenience enemies, but they just get up and I can't do anything with it, so why bother? But it turns out to be extremely powerful. So far we're seem to be doing a pretty good job preventing elites, focusing for example, that guy, focusing our damage on one particular guy. Here I want to hit this guy and I want to line up the other enemies behind him so that we don't get flanked like happened there, because I stopped worrying about people behind me. Oh yeah, how to stop elites. So any strong enough attack will prevent an enemy from turning elite. So basically an R2 heavy attack, or an R1 if it's like the end of a combo. There's a kick, that's an R2 move. Atreus shooting them with an arrow will interrupt their transformation. Also, an axe throw if you hit them with an axe throw, they'll stop turning elite. Or a runic attack will do it. There's all sorts of ways, but things can get out of hand because it's hard to not accidentally damage or intentionally do a little bit of damage to lots of enemies during a fight, and then if they all turn elite, that's bad news. I should say though, I do like the inclusion of elites in GMGOW mode. It just sort of adds an extra tactical wrinkle to fights. It's fun. I like it. Those blue guys, the bald-headed ones, are not immune to your axe, unlike the guys with the crowns, but I just meleeed him anyway. Okay, here we are, again, one of the many hard fights in the beginning of the game. If you're new to GMGOW, this is sort of a crucible. This guy's over my level, but we're able to put him down on the ground using Executioner's Cleave. Good thing we unlocked that, right? And then using grinding storm or something like that. Whatever that other move we unlocked is, we quickly were able to stun him. Things do, I remember, get out of hand in this fight. I end up, like, I failed knocking that guy off the cliff. A failed ring out. It was 1 elite, 2 elite, 3 elites. And there, as you saw, these guys, I can't just lift them. I can't launch them with the normal R1 attack, unlike normal guys my rank. So I start using Executioner's Cleave, hoping to knock them off the cliff that way. Using that kick that he does, just like that. This guy, he dissolves, like, the ring out, totally unnecessary. Same with this guy. Well, that thing's got a little back in hand. And quickly getting rid of this projectile guy. These are heavy axe throws. Even on GMGOW difficulty, you know, two of those against these lower level projectile guys is enough to kill them. I think this is the last enemy here before the next fight in this area, which is the heavy draugr fight, the introduction of heavy draugrs. Here we'll see, I think in a little bit, I decide to unlock, yeah, the 4-hit combo with the heavy finisher, Pride of the Frost, expressly to use on this heavy draugr. And looks like we're unlocking a couple Atreus abilities as well, whatever we can afford. The skills I unlock, again, not necessarily optimal. They're, you know, like some you might want to wait to unlock Atreus stuff if you value other things first. But I certainly, like, Executioner's Cleave is so handy. I definitely recommend that as like your first unlock in GMGOW mode. And then basically all the axe skills I try to unlock immediately, with the exception maybe of Hunter Killer. I never got too into using that one, although I'm sure there's some brilliant stuff you can do with it. That's the one where you hold R1 while you're aiming the axe, and you sort of mark targets on enemies and then let go, and the axe just seeks out like all the spots you've marked. Here we're using the old parry Executioner's Cleave 1-2 punch. Very handy in early game. This draugr, you see, he's like doing this like stretching / taunting behavior. Sometimes after you land an Executioner's Cleave on them, they do that. They just sort of like they like flex on you. They're like, yeah, that felt good, I loved it. Give me another one, please. Sometimes you could line up like multiple Executioner's Cleaves all in the same heavy draugr, because they're so busy like doing their exercises or making fun of you. Eventually you unlock the parry counterattack, like shield punch thing, but early game you don't have that, and the parry to Executioner's Cleave can sort of fill that gap. even when you have the parry counter unlocked, I often do Executioner's Cleave instead. Although the parry counter is safer. It's like 100% iframes. You just can't be hit when you do it. Whereas Executioner's Cleave, you can't be hit during the animation, but as soon as it ends, if an enemy happens to be swinging, like in their hit frames overlapped the end of Executioner's Cleave, there's just no dodging it. So that will happen occasionally. This guy is very dangerous. You notice here he's doing the mockery routine and letting me hit him a few times in a row. When I come down here, I try to pick up those hack silver bundles before engaging with this guy, because usually he kills me and they're gone forever. I don't think he kills me this time. I know he doesn't. I won't give away my first death in this run, but I do pretty well. It's much later than usual. Usually, like, the first few, like, I'll die in the very first fight. The wolves definitely are a sticking point. I mean, I definitely struggle way less than my first time through the game. But it's almost like the more comfortable you become with the game, you start playing like extra playfully, let's say, and sloppy, and you get careless. So I still die plenty, even though these fights, if I'm really trying to get through them, they're a lot more manageable than they were my first time through. Okay, well, we are at the end of this video, so we'll pick up with the second one right where we left off here, this dank, dark, creepy tomb of some sort. Rewatching this, I noticed that I talked over this part, which is important. Here we have Atreus knock this revenant shield off, and then use that cheeky rage burst to get a ring out. We don't like fighting revenants fair here, so as much as possible we will cheap shot them. That's all for now. See you later.